All right, Firebird Estates. Reverse channels on a cabinet. So let's go over that real quick here. Nothing too crazy, you know, reverse channel letter's fine, push through cabinet's fine, but it's the way this thing mounts causes it to, of course, instead of just being a simple shoebox, the shoebox becomes complicated because it has different mounting things. So what I'm going to do is, instead of just going right into the lay of the land of like all the routing stuff like I do, we're going to do an overview and get install out of the way. And then that will help also explain why we're building it the way we're building it. So again, nothing too crazy. Just want to point out a few things that are a little different that might get missed. Otherwise, this probably would be a PDF job. So anyway, so you got two different locations. You have the north facing the Ramon side. That faces Ramon, and then on the opposite side facing south is the Camino Paracello. So the problem with this is that, as you can see, I went and took a look at these. I measured them out, and but yeah, these are the old-timey Palm Springs. I think this roof's only like 7 feet tall. So like if I lived there, I'd be a hunchback because I'd be ducking my head everywhere. So there isn't a whole lot of room to work with. Plus, the Camino, I say right here, the no Nachi versus Nachi. So on the Camino side, this block wall, I don't know if install's actually taken a look at this or not, but somebody measured it. The block wall is actually sticking out about a ½ inch. And then you have stucco, and then if you can see, you have this rubberized like gasket thing that's almost exactly 1 inch. So you have the flashing, and you have this 1 inch of rubber seal, and then you have the start of the block wall. That sticking out a ½ inch means that the cabinet itself has to be notched. So that's the Camino side. When you go over to the Ramon side, the block is actually flush, if not back a little bit. So you don't have to worry about the notch on the Ramon side. The cabinet itself won't be notched. But you will need to bring some things to cut off some brackets that are there for, I don't know, old school stuff they used to do, maybe Christmas or something. I don't know. But you're going to need to probably bring a grinder or something to get rid of some of these brackets, because I think this is 96 inches and our cabinet's 126. So it'll probably, you know, if it's going to go in this area. Also, that being said, you can see where the signs themselves were kind of designed around the Camino side. There's a little more room here, and you have about 2 inches of flashing. And the way the sign is designed and the way the pattern's kind of laid out, there's a 1 inch here. And then for me, the way I built it is I also took into account the 1 inch worth of rubber, which you can't attach to. So the backer piece that goes to the wall will fit in between this rubber, and it should be 1 inch down, you know, whatever you guys decide. And then it should be right at the edge of that rubber there. So you'll be able to find, you know, whatever. Also, in order to make it simpler or more simplify things, I didn't make the bottom part actually attached to the brick. So that's kind of, you know, to try to thread that needle of switching over from the stucco and then trying to make it 4x over onto this. There was really no need. So the cabinet so basically the structure of the cabinet will be where the stucco is, and that's roughly about 19 to 18 inches. And then the part that hangs down on both sides is actually just sort of dummied up, you know, just to give it the look. But all the structure will be, you know, where the studs are for you and stuff. So hopefully that'll be a lot better. But the flashing and stuff laid out on this side, as you can see, it's the same size sign on this side, but there's this weird step, and the flashing changes, and it gets really big here. And again, it's not that big a deal, but let me just go right to the patterns. So for you guys on the install, I went ahead and made a Camino pattern and a Ramon pattern. Since the Ramon side doesn't have to worry about the step, you can just use this pattern and try to do what you can to deal with like where you're going to put it, as far as does it sit on the flashing, or are you going to bring the sign down here and let it come down into the brick or whatever. But you don't have to worry about any of that. You just need to grind these off and make sure it's clear. But as far as the Camino side, I went ahead and let's go ahead and switch to wireframe here so you can see it. So I made this line here. If you just take this pattern, put it up there, it should be the 1 inch from the flashing should work. And if you put this line basically in line with the brick, then that should get you where you need to be. That should put the backer a little bit above the rubber. And then that also means that the notch that I created will straddle that part there. So you can see the light blue is where I made the brick. So I allowed for an 1/8 inch, and I allowed for an 1/8 inch all the way around. So the side piece that is notched, where it is, there it is. So you got the Camino, so I have everything labeled. You'll see what's up. We'll go over that. But that'll notch the brick just right with an 1/8 inch there and an 1/8 inch there, an 1/8 inch everywhere. So anyway, so you can kind of see what's going on with that. So if you put those patterns up the way I have them right there, that should work out for you. You could maybe choose to cut the pattern right there and just put it up against the brick, or fold the pattern, you know, whatever you decide. And I went ahead and left. You'll have lines where the cabinet backer is, and you'll have lines where the actual cabinet is. And then I also put the letters on there too, just so you can maybe have an eyeball of what looks good, especially on the Ramon side, whether or not you choose to just go over the flashing and bolt it down over it, or try to bring it down below the flashing. Also for install, I'll be going over all the power here in a bit for fab, but for install, I went ahead and put the power in the middle. I know that there isn't any, obviously, just by the pictures. It's just a plywood sign right here. This is coming up. I don't know if you'll have to just use that. If you face it here, like as you're looking at it, I'm going to put the power to the left. I'm going to go over how it all is. But basically, you need to try to just get primary, because I figured on the back side of this is probably somebody's unit. So there's no, like we like to put a remote power supply. So I went ahead and put the power supply in the sign, which, we don't like to do, but I went ahead and did that. So you're going to have to figure out on this side too. I don't know where power is. So you're going to have to figure out how to get power. And if you want to run it, underneath, again, this will all be dummied up. You'll see in a minute. Anyway, but just keep that in mind. I went ahead and put holes for power. Should there be power back there? I'm not sure. But again, you're probably going to have to Frankenstein somehow, I imagine, to get the power. The power is going to have to get to the left side of the sign. So just keep that in mind. That's all heads up for install. Let's go over the lay of the land. So I broke it up into the Ramon face. They are a little different because this one doesn't have a notch. So the bottom of the sign is actually longer. It's like more of like a normal cabinet that we would send out, like a shoebox. So the bottom isn't chopped, and the side pieces don't have any notches or anything. So just keep an eye out for anything labeled Ramon. Otherwise, stuff's universal, like the verticals and stuff are universal, but otherwise you'll see it labeled. So keep an eye out. And I went ahead and just broke it up into the two types. So you have the face, and over here you got Camino. Same thing, except you got notch, and the bottom of the cabinet is shorter, stubbier, so that way it clears the bricks. The backers are essentially the same, but just to avoid confusion, they're labeled Ramon, but technically the backers are the same. So just keep an eye out for those. So we'll go over the power. It's internal, but I got some little things to try to help serviceability and whatnot. So you got a condensed birdhouse here. Keep an eye out for all the usual parts. Switch plates are custom. They're not universal to what we usually use. Keep an eye out for these trays. So you got 1/2 inch pushies and the usual backers there. Get those to first shop. So I already talked to Adrian. We're going to go with small tabs because it's 2-inch letters on the reverse channels. Here, I'm running up against it here. Let me grab my page turner here. There you go. As far as the logo is concerned, or the reverse channels, I also talked to Adrian about this. Since this is sort of scripty and small, the dots of the eyes are really small. So I'm going to go ahead and bite the bullet on those. You're going to go ahead and get 3/8 thick clear for that. So you can just use direct screws, and we don't have, it's going to be enough blocking light anyway without tabs. That being said, I'm trying something here. These guys are going to be island filled down halfway. So that way the number 10 screws will be below the surface. That way it'll be easy to put LEDs down. So you're not 4-by-in and trying to silicone LEDs down. Same thing here. I'm trying this. I'm going to take this down in 09. It's not quite the full thickness of a screw head, but it pretty much brings it almost flush. So that way when you go to screw on, just use number 10 screws, sheet metal, just screw them down. and then that'll help you. You should be able to 4x over those pretty easily with your product. So that should be that. Keep an eye out. How you guys roll reverse channels. 2 patterns again. Install. Keep an eye out. Okay, so just reverse channels. Like I said, talked about it. 2-inch depth. You got your whatever there. I gave you spacer count. I'm not ordering spacers yet. Whatever. We still have that bucket. Whether or not it's supposed to be 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch, maybe you guys could do a test light, see how it looks. But again, I gave you a count here. So you have 7 powers, 47 spacers times 2. So roughly 110 spacers and screws you'll need. So if you need to order them in, I gave you a count. Otherwise, dig through that bin. I'm sure we still have lots of spacers. Anyway, so you got all those guys. Look for all that. No big deal. All right, so the cabinet, again, it's just a shoebox cabinet. Let's start with the backers. Just seam it together, lords that together, good to go. Bend up this side. It's open on this side. You'll go ahead and put your braces all the way through, and that'll basically be that as far as getting that done. Now you will let's go over how this thing is going to lock in. The face is going to come off, and it will lock into similar to what we've done. I think the surfboard things that we did, where you're going to put the riv nut. The riv nut is going to stick to the bottom out, and then you're going to put a bolt through. This is 5/16. You're going to put a bolt through, and I have a 1-inch bolt here. Don't go anything longer than a 1-inch, because we don't want to have to lift this up too high to take it off. So you can see the green here is the face and how it locks in. So you got about 3/4 of an inch right here. So you're going to feed you're going to do a full squish, and then you're going to feed a 5/16 up from the bottom, and that's going to be your little peg there. And then this whole system here is just, will come in with the face and just bonk, down. So, and then the top will be number 10s all the way across. So you'll have 4 spots where the riv nuts are, and that's on the backer. Again, put them with the squish out, and then put a nut or a bolt in from the bottom, and then you'll have a peg. So that's how that'll go. That's your backer there. For the face, because it comes off and on and all that, and has to, have all this stuff on there, and it has push throughs and all that. What you're going to do is you'll have these 2 long bars, which will basically be the dummied bottom, and this will be where the studs actually mount to. So you'll have those 4 holes. What you're going to do is just get these ready to go, get these bent, and then you're going to take the 2 face pieces, and where these riv nuts line up, this will be basically your bottom seam piece. So I staggered the seams pretty well. So you can see here, this is the middle seam here. You have almost like 2 feet before this seam. So this whole bottom thing will keep this probably really nice and rigid. But because this ridge is breaking everything up right here, that has to sit there, then your verticals are actually chopped. So they can't do quite the same work that we normally do. So your verticals, I have all the verticals are typical. So all the different mounting hole parts, I went ahead and made them universal. And then you'll have one big boy, which is your seam right here. So go ahead and do these guys, lords this all really good, lords it to there, make that all one piece. And then you'll bring in your seam piece here, and then that will stabilize the 2 faces. And then go ahead and put your other ones in. They will connect right up against that green and help that remain a nice solid shelf. So you got your verticals, you'll do your push throughs, shoot your studs. And then let's talk about power. We got power here. So power will be in the backer. And again, like I said in the prior part of the video there, whether you can be lucky enough to get power in, that'd be great. But just so you know, during assembly and for install, I made it to where you don't have to take the whole face off every time to service it. So what I did is I made the side panel. This side panel is going to be removable with screws, and you'll be able to get to the switch. But what you're going to do is take this side panel off, and it gives you the ability to access the power supply with like a toaster slot style. You'll pull it out like a VCR. And then when you go to assemble, make sure that all your leashes are long enough to be able to pull this out. and make sure you do a permanent bond fab, so that way, you know, it stays bonded when you pull it. You know, when you take these screws out, this will technically be live. So you want to make sure this stays bonded. But like I say, the whole idea though is to make it serviceable out the side. So that way, in case a power supply goes out or something, we don't have to take this entire thing off, and we don't have to have like a door in the face of this making it look ugly. So anyway, so a lot of explanation for a short trip. But this guy is, he's going to be a little tough to bend. Do the best you can because it is shorter in the middle than it is long on the sides. Our brake usually doesn't like to do that, but just do the best you can and kind of manhandle it. You're going to be riveting this bottom piece. Make sure it goes in the right direction. You're going to rivet it to the bottom inside blue. That's a little drain hole there. And then that gives you your, you know, your screw for your door cover and all that. So you know how we do with this. Oh, let me make sure you guys know about this. So in order for this door to attach to the side, the power side, you know, so you're going to weld closed the side that's the permanent side. Sure, like we do, fine. But on this side, since we're going to make attachable doors and stuff, all you're going to have is this little piece here. So make sure this gets lordsed on right there. And then that's going to be where this panel, and you'll see where it's clearance for the switch and stuff. That's where that panel will attach. And then down here is where the panel attaches here, one little screw there. So it's kind of a combination of everything. You'll have the screw there and screw there, or no, over here. There you go. So screws there, and then you'll have a screw there and a screw there with that. So make sure that gets lordsed on, and then make sure that this single vertical piece gets bent and attached. Make sure the flange is real close to the push-throughs. That's what this is for, right here. So I'm afraid that this light here is going to, you know, bleed out, and we're probably going to have light leak. Hopefully not. So if you lords on this piece, it should be close enough to this leg to cause enough shadow that light shouldn't make it through. And by the time it gets done going through here and stuff, so there should be enough baffle. But don't forget this piece right here, and make sure that it gets bent and attached, so that way it causes a little seal right there. Hopefully that'll be enough there. So those are really the only two fiddly bits, is just make sure that one piece gets on there and make sure this piece gets on there. But otherwise it's all structural and it all makes sense, I think. Also here, you're going to inject some lords because this part here has to clearance for the backer. So just inject some lords and hopefully that's enough. If not, then you can just put a piece on top on the outside, even though it'll look ugly. But I think it'll be high up enough that nobody will see it. Just keep it back a little bit. So if you need to stabilize this seam more than what this can provide, then just put a piece on the outside. So, but I think it'll be okay. So anyway, I think that's it. If you have any questions, you know, hit me up. Check the technique. Check the technique. See if you can follow it.